You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
A source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the province.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high. A lot of things.
State of MedTech.
With your host, Omar M. Khatib.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of MedTech Growth Levers. Today, I'm solo hosting. My dear friend and co-host, Orette, is a new daddy. Congratulations to Orette and his beautiful wife. They welcomed a beautiful baby boy, so really excited for them. So he is on a parental leave. He's probably doing a little, some skin-to-skin action, loving that new baby boy. I'm so excited about it. And more importantly, I just want to tell him as a friend, like, I'm really proud of you. So that being said, today we got a really interesting topic. Persuasion is something that we all do, whether you are in sales or marketing, finance, it's a big part of it. But especially as a marketer, it's very important to understand the levers of persuasion. We all know about persuasion, but we don't take a formulaic approach to it. And I think that once you break down the elements of persuasion, it becomes so much easier for you to look at your marketing materials, your sales, etc., and say, okay, like, am I incorporating the right principles of persuasion, right, to help me get a deal? So let's go ahead and get into that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let me take care of the people at Zoom. For those who are listening live or on recording, if you want to join these free Zoom calls, just check the show notes below. There's a link. Register. You'll get notified of these Wednesday sessions. You can join the Zoom and ask questions there. All right. And actually, while we're doing this, I'm going to try and multitask here and open LinkedIn, because I know that LinkedIn starts popping off lately for us, and so we get some questions there. So I'm trying to help people out and get on LinkedIn Q&A. So let me jump over there real quick. And for the people on Zoom, can you give me just a thumbs up? You guys can see the screen. It should say Influence Framework. Yep. All right. Thank you, Brand. I appreciate you. Okay. Perfect. All right. Here we go. Now I'm on LinkedIn. And for some reason, the video quality is so bad. All right. Well, not much I can do there. All right. Let me go ahead and share my screen to LinkedIn. Let's go over here. All right, perfect. There we go. So let's talk about the influence framework, okay? So the first thing is that this is not my framework. I want to be very clear about that. We're going to take this framework from the godfather of persuasion himself. That's Robert Cialdini. And for me, at least, when I think about influence, I really like this framework, and I kind of put it in a way that will be very easy for you guys to remember. The one I think superpower I got leaving medical school is that I'm really good at mnemonics, okay? So the mnemonic device I want you to remember is R class U. This is our class. It's like a university, R class U. Now, some of you who are persuasion students or have been following me for a while, you might say, wait, I thought it's 6 principles of persuasion. What's the 7th one? Well, after over 2 decades of research, Robert Cialdini came across a 7th principle of persuasion. So let's go through these principles of persuasion real quick, and then I want to show you guys how this fits into a funnel and how you got to think about it, okay? So the first one is reciprocity. You do something nice for me, I'm going to do something nice back. This is in our industry. This is why the Sunshine Act and Stark Law exist, because, when you give a physician any kind of present, money, of course, like, reciprocity is a really powerful form of persuasion, okay? The next one is commitment and consistency, okay? As we get older, this becomes very, very persuasive. So if you are dealing with a surgeon who prides themselves and their center as being a center of excellence, being very innovative, you could persuade them by being consistent with that bias, right? And on top of it, as we get older, when you make certain commitments, it becomes more persuasive, right? This is why we like to have people do things publicly. Probably the most persuasive thing you can do if you're trying to start a new habit, right, or kick a bad one, is make a public declaration, because you are now on the hook publicly, okay? Third one of our class U is liking, okay? we are generally persuaded by people who are like us. So like us in the sense that, for example, I have a much easier time persuading a medtech company to use my agency, right, for marketing than another agency who's non-medtech. Even though another agency, I mean, look, there's plenty of marketers out there. In my opinion, their technical abilities are much better than mine. I have this advantage because I come from medtech, right? The other side of it is people literally like you, right? So that could be somebody with the same name as you, same cultural background. If you look even in the animal world, in this photo, all these puffins are starting to fly away. These other things, which I have no idea what those things are, they're not even moving. Maybe they're penguins. It's probably why they don't fly, but you get the point, okay? Next one, very famous one. I picked one, a classic from the medical world, which is authority bias, right? So the moment you're in a position of authority, you have a lot of persuasion. In this case, they used to use doctors to sell cigarettes. So the fact that a doctor is a beacon of health is saying, hey, like in between my rounds, like I always smoke a pack of cigarettes, like that sold a lot of cigarettes, okay? We're getting close to the end. So scarcity. So when you have a very scarce amount of something, it's going to be persuasive. We often see this in the marketing world where it's like, hey, 24-hour fire sale, we have limited seats. As it relates to our audience, medtech marketers, you could hypothetically do this. There's nothing illegal about this, but you can say that you run a webinar and say, limited space, register now. We all know that's digital and there's unlimited space, but even me as a marketer knowing this, I fall into this bias of persuasion. When someone puts this on the webinar, I'm like, oh, let me just register now, right? Finally, we have social proof. Social proof is a great one. It's something that I don't think enough medtech or B2B companies take advantage of, which is showing how many people use their product, right? For example, I once heard about this book called Ikigai. Never heard about it before. I've heard of the concept of Ikigai. I bought this immediately. Why? 20,000 ratings. It's a lot of persuasion behind it, okay? Social proof, really powerful. I love it because if you think about it, the brain that sits in our skull has not evolved in thousands of years. It's still the same thing. And so if we see something that has approval of the tribe, right? Tribe of people, peers, etc., we are way more persuaded by it, right? This is why you see, I'll give you a great example. In the consumer world, you'll see a toothpaste that says the #1 recommended toothpaste by dentists, okay? So there's an authority bias there, being dentists, and there's a social proof bias because by using the plural of dentists, it could be 100 dentists, it could be 1,000, it could be 1,000,000, it could be 5, but it still serves the same purpose, okay? And finally, the 7th principle of persuasion that Cialdini discovered many years later, which we can really leverage as marketers, is the idea of unity, okay? It's a little bit different from social proof. Unity, you want to think about it as a movement, right? So for example, you can get surgeons who are unified in the idea of using robotics to be more precise. You can get certain nurse practitioners who might have a certain approach or believe that the current status quo is not good, or like unify around that, okay? It's a really powerful thing. We're in election season. This is going to be a piece of persuasion that's constantly used, which is us versus them, right? And, one of my favorite examples of unity was Warren Buffett writes these great letters to shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway. And, at the bottom, one of the letters, so I'm going to read this out for those who are listening only. He says, a number of good things happened in Berkshire last year, but let's first get the bad news out of the way. I will tell you what I would say to my family today if they asked me about Berkshire's future. So just by saying that you're like family, that creates a sense of unity. So those are the principles of persuasion. Remember, the acronym that you want to use is R-Class-U. And as you train yourself on this, okay, this will become literally second nature to you. I am persuasive with my wife about things without even thinking about it, okay? What I recommend is look up these principles of persuasion. R-Class-U, so that's reciprocity, commitment and consistency, liking, authority, scarcity, social proof, and unity. And maybe every week, focus on just one of those persuasive principles, okay? This is like your 2-month persuasion course in the real world. So focus on one thing. So this week, focus on reciprocity and pay attention how it works. the more you start paying attention to what persuades you, the easier it is for you to incorporate that into your sales and marketing yourself, okay? Now, how does this translate to a marketing funnel? Well, I'm going to bring up this marketing funnel, okay? And of course, I'm going to, let me copy this over real quick. I can't copy that. All right. So when we look at a marketing funnel, okay, we want principles of persuasion all around here, okay? The place where principles of persuasion work the most are usually in the middle of the funnel and the bottom of the funnel. The reason why is that if you think about middle funnel, we're looking at company culture, your product content, a solution to a problem. Bottom of the funnel is reasons to believe. Now, your top of funnel, okay, if you think about it, a lot of times people use persuasive elements for their product way up above. The problem with that is that that's only going to resonate with a few people. Your goal as a marketer is start with top of funnel content that's going to get attention, okay? You definitely can use persuasive elements in getting attention, but it doesn't have to relate to your product. Once you get those people in your funnel, you start funneling them down towards the bottom of the funnel. And as they get there, you have to think about all these persuasive elements, because by the time someone's here, okay, they're looking for that one reason to buy, okay? Now, let's look at something that is supposed to be full of persuasion, whether you're a marketer, a CEO, etc., which is your own LinkedIn profile, okay? If you think about it, when you market, let's say I'm going to use the great example of a CEO raising money. You have to find ways to get attention as a CEO. So let's go to LinkedIn and just scroll the news feed real quick, okay? See if anything pops up. So Greg's not raising money, but this might get your attention, okay? Let's see if we can go a little bit longer. Let's see. I'm sure we're going to see one, hopefully, piece. Come on, let's get one founder. Okay, so this is a great one, okay? Top of funnel, okay? There's some quotes, who knows what it is, but it's enough to get your attention and get curious to click on this guy's profile, okay? Once you click on someone's profile, there has to be all these persuasive elements. So for mine, if we see helping medtech companies grow sales pipeline and find investors using social media, okay? Host of medtech's #1 podcast. There's authority bias there. Okay, proud husband and father. What's that? That's a liking bias. Avid reader, jujitsu. So up here, I kind of put a lot of authority bias and liking bias, right? As you start scrolling down, okay, you see that, okay, 38,000 followers. There's a social proof bias there. It's like, okay, 38,000 people thought this guy was interesting. Maybe I should too, okay? You scroll down more. You start seeing more authority bias. So here's some people that I've interviewed. Now I'm hijacking authority bias. I'm not the CEO of Medtronic, but the fact that CEO of Medtronic did an interview with me stacks some persuasive elements in my favor. Keep in mind, the mind is not designed to separate these elements out. It just all wraps together, okay? And of course, as you go through, you'll see more pieces of persuasion in my own LinkedIn profile. The more you start thinking about this, the better. And if you want maybe the ultimate machine when it comes to persuasion, it's Amazon. Okay, let's take a quick look at Amazon. So I'm going to, let's see, what's something that I wanted to buy recently? Something that's random. Let's say barbecue injector. I love barbecue. All right, so I'm just gonna look at this. There's a bunch of these. Okay, so let's take a look. All right, here's one. Okay, so you can tell from Amazon's own page here, what are they leaning on? Of course, there's features here and everything. The main thing that people are being persuaded by, because this is a top of funnel thing in consumer land, social proof, okay? 3,970, there's a big difference between this and everything else, even though technically this looks like a better product in my opinion. And so does this. I know this is actually a really good product, but 3,000 is huge. If we go there, okay, what are we going to see? We're going to see some social proof here, okay? We're going to scroll down. I think some of these will have some authority bias. So again, a lot of pictures, okay? Some of it's going to have some liking effect in it, for example. So if you look at the people, let me see, I don't know if they do it here. Yeah, so there's a little bit of a liking effect here in the sense of where the applications are. So it's like, hey, Thanksgiving, I guarantee you that they changed this image out recently to be Thanksgiving because we're getting close to November, okay? Here's another one which is like more meat, so like a brisket guy like me. The point of all this is that as you start thinking about your elements of persuasion, you're able to bake it into your own copy and your messages. I'll quote the famous Charlie Munger, who said that, when it comes to persuasion, we don't know how these elements influence each other. Like if you took two persuasive elements, is that an additive or is it multiplying effect? We don't know. So the more you can bake in, the better. So that's the lesson for today. Let's go ahead and jump to some Q&A if there's any. So let's see who has the first question. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing there. All right, go ahead and unmute yourself and come on and just share what you want. Ask any questions you want. Let me just check LinkedIn. All right.
Mark, can I ask a question?
Yeah, anybody can ask a question. Yeah, please go ahead.
I hopped in a little bit late. I'm sorry. So our class U, are we doing it in that same chronological order, or is that just an acronym that you came up with?
It's an acronym that I came up with, and let me go back and kind of walk it through for you. So for our class U, it's reciprocity, commitment, consistency, liking, authority, social proof, scarcity, unity. The way that you want to look at this is I can't say that I can't rank what a lot of people try and do is they try and rank these out, right? As to like what's most important. And it's hard to pick one over the other because at the end of the day, for example, for me, when it comes to buying something like random on Amazon, social proof is really important to me. So like I'll buy literally just based on that. But if you change the product and say it's I don't know. If it's like a let's say I'm looking for a trainer to train in at the gym, I don't care how many thousands of people review them. I want to know like a few key people who I respect. So for example, there have been books that I've purchased and I spend a lot of money on that maybe had like, a handful of Amazon reviews, but the person who recommended the book to me has a lot of authority bias with me. Okay. And so that's why you have to always assume that when you're dealing with a customer, or a prospect in this case, you don't know which one of those persuasive elements subconsciously is going to be enough for them to make that decision, right? And so that's why you have to have all of those things, and if you look at some of the, big marketing agencies in the world, when it comes to their case studies and everything, the way they present themselves on the website, they present all of those things. There's social proof, there's authority, there's liking, etc. Everything is there because at the end of the day, every person has their own combination of persuasive elements that persuade them. Okay, you just got to figure out which ones you need to add first. So, like in our industry, like with when you're dealing with clinicians, I would say that, and let me go back to our class U. I would say that for our industry, like authority bias is a really important one, right? Liking effect. So this is why, like, early on in your if you're dealing with a medtech company, it's so important to pick your KOLs pick the correct ones. Okay, and you want to mix. You want some KOLs who maybe not everybody knows, but they're like a certain person that a lot of physicians know, and they're like, oh, I'm influenced that person. You also want some people who are like a lot more visible. Let's say they post a lot on social media, they're on podium, etc. So that way, even with KOLs, you have the right mix. I would take it even further, for example, and I try and have, let me put it this way. You can learn a lot when you watch TV and you pay attention to the ads. Okay, there's a reason why all the ads don't just have only men in them or only women in them, unless that's their target demographic, right? At the end of the day, you want to have a mix. So like if I was running a medtech company and I had like clinical adopters, okay, I would try to have, and I'm going to be a little biased here, but like this is this is kind of a fact. For example, certain specialties are highly dominated by one sex over the other. Like, for example, OBGYNs, I think as of recently, there are more female OBGYNs than male OBGYNs. I would try my best to say, hey, like, I need a female OBGYN because that's the majority of the people who are in that specialty, right? So that way you have the right people. Sometimes I even prefer to have like a young KOL and an old KOL, because sometimes, like, when you're dealing with KOLs and you want them to influence each other, if you got a KOL who doesn't fit the mold of what your prospect wants or who they want to be, it's not going to be persuasive, you know? Like, for example, sometimes I see, in my opinion, the mistake that companies make is that they often go for an academic KOL who's like really well known and everything. That academic KOL may not have any influence to the guy or gal who's running a thriving private practice, you know, that's growing in operation and everything. For them, they're like, okay, like, whatever, cool, you know? So you always have to keep that in mind. That makes sense?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. When we recently built a medical advisory board, and we went with one advisor who literally had like not a lot of publications, but had startup experts in his title. Where we focus on movement disorder specialists. To even see a movement disorder specialist who has interest in startups is rare. Turns out he was an advisor to another company that was acquired in our space. So we went after him, and then we went after another one who was just looking for publications, right? And he was a younger guy trying to make a name for himself. And now the third one we're going after is a really, really established guy, part of the movement disorder specialist mafia, quote unquote. You know, like top 5 or top 6 in the space, right? So it's awesome to have, like, you know, the first guy was a clinical director, and the second one was looking for publications, and the last one is really, really renowned in his space. So he has a lot of patients. So we kind of balanced it out that way.
Got it. Yeah, no,
Thank you.
and no, absolutely. We got a question from LinkedIn. So Dr. Qasim Butt, thanks for joining. So the question is, like, what books do you recommend on persuasion? There are a lot. Like, literally, I'm looking in my library. There's literally 2 shelves full of persuasive books, persuasive books. But I'm gonna recommend. There's a couple that I really recommend. So let me grab them and show them. Give me 1 second. Okay. So there are so many books on persuasion that are out there I really like, but a good foundation of persuasion, in my opinion, starts with these books. The very first one is Influence by Robert Cialdini. I would get all Cialdini's books. I think he has 2 other ones, but Influence is a very, very good one. You can kind of get the summary of it, but I recommend reading the books that way you really understand how these elements come into work. Oops, and I forgot one. Okay, so Influence is the first one. Second one I recommend is Persuasion, again by Dr. Robert Cialdini. So what Persuasion talks about is that if there's a moment in time where you're going to persuade, the time before that is what's called persuasion. Okay, so how do you prepare the mind to be persuaded? And if you look at our marketing funnel, the persuasion happens top of funnel. Because if you think about it, and again, like, let me go over and let me get to Zoom. I'm going to share my screen on Zoom real quick as well. Here we go. Now we're cooking. So if you think about the top of the funnel, that's all persuasion, getting attention, preparing the mind for persuasion. Once you get to middle and bottom of funnel, that's when all these persuasion elements really come into effect. Can persuasion happen at the very top of the funnel when someone just gets attention? Yeah, it could happen, but it's really rare. You want to think about all these elements. So those are the first 2 books I recommend. The other 2 that I do recommend, Qasim, one is, and this is a classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is a great book. It was written over 100 years ago. If a book's lasted over 50 years, like, it's a classic. Just so people know how good this book is, I think it's a CIA or FBI, like, over 100 years ago, started to use this book as a manual to train their agents. Okay, that's how good this book is. Okay, and the last one, shout out to my good friend and mentor from afar, Scott Adams. He wrote this book called Win Bigly. Okay, so Win Bigly was written about the 2016 elections and how persuasion is in a world where facts don't matter. And it's very true. Facts don't really matter. We think they do. This is a great book. Small recommendation, everybody. I just found out from Scott. So he just updated Win Bigly with a second edition. Do not buy the black cover Win Bigly. He does not make any money for that. I like to support authors. Go buy the second edition, which is a blue cover. I'm going to go buy it because, I love Scott and, his work is really good. But this is a very good one. So once you get through those, you will have like a solid foundation of persuasion. And the other thing is that it's just like a skill like anything else. You always have to train it. So you have to constantly be keeping it in mind. Even me today, I'm actually developing some ads that I'm going to be running on LinkedIn. You guys are probably going to see them. And for me, I'm having to sit down and go through some of my books on persuasion just to kind of think through the copy, right? And again, it's just like in anything else in life, like simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication. It's really hard. And so it takes time to kind of think through these things. So that way you have a very persuasive ad, message, so on and so forth. So great question, Qasim. All right, let me come back to Zoom. We got a couple questions. Shelley, can we see the covers of those books? I can only see your screen right now. Oh, yes. Let me come back. Bless you. And actually, let me stop sharing on LinkedIn as well. Okay, so here we go. Here are the covers. Okay, so first two books you're going to buy in Persuasion, Cialdini's, the two that go together, Influence and Persuasion. Okay, those are the first two. And then the second two, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and then Win Bigly by Scott Adams. Buy the blue cover of Win Bigly, though. Okay, it's really, really good. You're going to love it. So, great question. If somebody has another question on Zoom, go ahead and just unmute yourself. Let me go check on LinkedIn and see what else we got. We got a lot of people watching on LinkedIn. Yes, go ahead.
Question on examples of scarcity. I love using FOMO, but trying to think about how to use that in the med tech space. I feel like, always trying to be accommodating of everybody's different needs. How have you seen scarcity effectively used?
Yeah, so in the medtech space, the best way that I've seen scarcity used is when you have an event and you just put a limit on it, and you don't have to put a number, by the way. Literally, so if you, for example, something that medtech companies spend a lot of money on two things. One is like evening events at conferences, and the other one would be like like at booth presentation or something. I always like to put limited space. You don't get penalized for it. There's nothing wrong with it. Technically, it's true because if it's a physical thing, that's a great way to put scarcity. I even do it sometimes on webinars, depending on what the webinar is. Not every medtech company likes to do that. But again, at the end of the day, you want effective marketing. And so if that helps, go ahead and do it. Some people are like, oh, that's really lame. Don't do that. Well, in other industries, they've overused that scarcity principle. But in our industry, like nobody uses it. So my thing is like, might as well just use it. And if you want to feel better about it, you can put a cap, so for example, if you do like a private Zoom webinar with some clients or I'm sorry, with physicians, you can put a limit of like, limited to 20 people or something, so that way it's a discussion, so that's the best way that I think about scarcity. But again, like, I think that sometimes it's hard to get all of these elements, but the more you think about them, the more you can at least in your own copy, in your own marketing, even in your own emails. So I'll give you a great example is that when I send an email to a really big guest, okay, and actually, I'm gonna read it to you guys. When I send a pitch email to a really big guest, think of like a CEO, an investor, somebody who like does not need to come on my show. I bake so much persuasion into that email. So what do? I have a social proof bias. So I say, hey, like our subscribership is over 20,000 medtech investors, clinicians, and medtech professionals. So that's the social proof bias. And then I say, here's some past guests. And of course, in those past guests, I think of, okay, who's this person going to want to be like or be friends with? And so I put people in there like so-and-so, CEO of this public traded company, this investor who's got this, 10 billion AUM or something, right? So that way in that list, there's more than enough people for them to be like, oh, it's that person, it's that person, it's that person. And usually just after 3, that's more than enough, right? So when you're doing medtech sales, a lot of times it's just like, hey, if you want to stack up like who's using the product, you need like just 2 or 3 names, like so-and-so at this clinic, so-and-so at this hospital, so-and-so here, right? And then what helps it even better is that if you have somebody that's regional, like in that state or close by, you can use that as well, okay? The only feedback I give though, and this is on really rare occasion, I don't believe in the exceptions making the rule, but sometimes, like let's say when you're dealing with surgical technology, surgeons are pretty like territorial and catty, and so sometimes you got to make sure like, okay, is the person I'm going to tell this person about, like, do they technically respect them? And most of the time it's yes, but that's where you got to be careful. There's some surgeons that are great because they get attention, but they have that personality where you're like, okay, I know that they're going to be great for getting attention, but they might piss some people off. That's the only place you got to be careful with. So, good question, Brianna. What else, everybody? Any other questions? And again, if you have any questions that's not related to the topic today, I'm totally okay with taking those questions. We'll give it a minute. Let me check. If you're on Zoom, just go ahead and unmute yourself. Let me check LinkedIn. All right. No other question. Oh, we got an anonymous question. Okay. Let me be careful on how I read this anonymous question. All right. Anonymous question is, okay, this is a great question. The question is, what's the difference between persuasion and manipulation? Because this is something that my CEO always pushes back on. That's a great question, because a lot of times when people think about persuasion, they think about being manipulated, right? The way that I like to say it is, if you, and this is more of like an ethical thing, if you are persuading something to do something that is in their best interest, that is genuinely going to help them, okay, it's persuasion. It's completely ethical. But if you're doing something that consciously know ahead of time that they don't need this, it's not going to help them, etc., but you're doing it for your own personal gain, that's when it's manipulation, in my opinion. So for me, you better believe, like when I work with like certain clients, etc., like I deploy a lot of persuasion. But it's also because I genuinely know that what we're offering is going to help them, because they need help with marketing and content, etc., so on and so forth. I've often been in a situation where I'm talking to a company, and then in the meeting, I just realized technically they don't need us, because they have all these things going on internally, etc. And I'll often admit, and I'll say that I was like, hey, based on what you're telling me, like, it seems like you guys may not need our services because you have X, Y, and Z. Am I wrong in saying that? Sometimes they're like, yeah, like you're actually right. I'm like, in which case, cool. And a lot of times what I would say is another piece of persuasion is asking for help, right? And so because by asking for, there's an element when you're vulnerable with somebody that kind of puts you in a persuasive position. So a lot of times when you're dealing with, let's say, a surgeon, you kill yourself to get a surgeon or some clinician on a demo. You're doing the demo, and then halfway through you realize, oh, this is the wrong person because they are a consultant for a competitor, so on and so forth. Whatever it is, it's just like clearly disqualified. Don't lose that opportunity because you worked hard to get that lead. A lot of times I'll ask the physician, hey, you know what? It doesn't seem like this is going to be like a fit for you. It's totally fine. But just out of curiosity, like based on what you've seen today, is there a peer that you would recommend, or is there anybody that you think we should look at? It would be a really big help for me, because we we work really hard. It's hard to find physicians like you. Is there anybody else you'd recommend? Believe it or not, so many times we've built lead pipeline just by that one tactic. And a lot of times the physicians are very happy to not only email an intro, but I've had multiple times where physicians like, hey, like, give me your supplement. I'm gonna like get the text out right now, and I'll text intro you to like 2 other surgeons who I think will be better fits. So that's the one way you can always reconcile that. Great question. Yeah, I was gonna say the person's name, but I'm glad I stopped because it was anonymous for a reason. Perfect. All right, it looks like let me check on LinkedIn. All right, it looks like no other questions unless somebody jumps on Zoom. So thank you everybody for joining. So again, just as a reminder, these episodes always go up on the podcast. They're gonna be marked as marketing. We have a new team working the pod now. So hopefully rather than a week, these episodes will be up in the next couple of days. So be sure to check out the podcast. If you haven't already, subscribe, give us 5 stars. And as always, we'll see you guys next week. Bye everybody. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.